This is the first tutorial that will take you through the basics of how to use SketchUp 8. We'll just go right from the beginning so that you know where to go to get the program. If you go to your Start menu and you type in SKE, it will bring up what's previously been installed. Now, SketchUp 8, which we're using at the moment, is a little bit old. So there are newer versions, but this is the version we'll be using now. And most of the skills you'll learn here can very easily be moved onto the later versions. So you've got a little bit more functionality. So when you first load it up, you'll come up with this little splash screen. Now, you'll need to click on the template option. And when you do that, you select meters, and that will make things a lot easier for you later on for using, since we'll be developing our skills to be able to model a house. So once I've selected that, I'm going to click on the Start Using SketchUp button down here in the bottom, and that will, after a few seconds, load up the interface of SketchUp for us. Now, when we're using SketchUp, we can get rid of this little window here, but a very, very handy button to use is the middle mouse button or the scroll wheel. So if you scroll up, it will zoom in, and scrolling down will zoom out. But probably the most useful feature would be the fact that you can press it in, and that allows you to move your world around. Now, this will make more sense later on. So what we'll do now is we'll draw a basic shape, and that will allow you to see how you can look around and use this orbit function to see all the sides of it. So I'm going to click on the rectangle box up here, and that will allow me to click and drag out a shape. Now, you'll see that it looks like it's disappearing a little bit in the distance, and it's getting more narrow from the top part of the box, and that's because we're dealing with perspective when we're looking at this shape. So if I press down my middle mouse button now, it allows me to orbit around, and you can see that that is quite a long rectangle that I've drawn. It doesn't always appear to be as obvious when you're looking at it only from one perspective. So this is one of the issues we've got, that we're working in a 3D environment, but we're using a two-dimensional display, so a screen, in order to be able to see everything. So you have to keep moving around to get that idea about how big things are, how far they actually travel, what the real shape of them is. Now, another thing which is very similar, another feature which is similar to the orbit function, is the pan function. So if you hold Shift on your keyboard and also press the middle mouse button down, that brings up the hand, and that allows you to pull your world around. So in times where you might be zoomed in like this, and you're orbiting around, and you really want to see the bottom corner of this rectangle, but you can't quite get there, it's handy to be able to press the Shift key and the middle mouse to be able to bring that up. And you can do that in stages until you get to that area that you want to view. So then we'll zoom back out a little bit, and that is really, really important that you keep a track of using those tools. You can also click up here. You've got your orbit and so I can use the left mouse button now. You've got your pan, but it's much easier to be able to use the shortcuts of the middle mouse button and the Shift key, because you'll be using these tools so often that you won't want to keep going up here and clicking on these two options. So what we're going to do now is do another one of the basic shapes, which is a circle, and we'll put that flat on the ground. Now, the way that you're looking at your world will influence where it draws a shape or how it draws it. So if I angle it down, so I'm looking more at the horizon, and then I try and draw it, you'll see now that it's drawn that one so it's facing upwards, or it's vertical. So the program tries to guess the way you want to draw it based upon how you're looking at the world. Okay, so we've now looked at the template, which is meters. We've looked at doing a couple of basic shapes. We've looked at using the orbit and the pan. Now, the next thing we'll use is one of the really cool features of this program, and that is turning things into three-dimensional objects. Because right now we're dealing with a three-dimensional world, but everything is flat, so it's only got 2 dimensions of height and width. So using this tool over here, which is called the push-pull, it allows you to hover your mouse over one of these flat shapes and drag it, and you can keep dragging the sides, and that turns things three-dimensional, which is pretty cool. You can do the same thing with circles, doesn't matter which way you do it. And another really nice feature is that you can use one of these basic drawing shapes. We can create any sort of shape on the side there, and then we can use the push-pull to continuously modify how that shape looks. So that's a fun feature to play around with. You can create some really cool, very quick, very easy three-dimensional objects there. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is if I go into my pen tool, that allows me to draw basic lines. Now I'm going to press escape to get off that, otherwise it wants to keep selecting, drawing more and more lines joined together. But when you've got something like the pen tool selected, it will want to naturally snap to different points of the things you've already created. So if it comes up with a blue line or a blue mark underneath my pen, it means that if I start drawing from here, as it says there, I'm going to be drawing on the face. Now that's really important because it means that I'm not actually drawing right far in the distance over here, which I can't see just because I'm looking at it from this perspective. So because it's got the blue and it's saying on the face, I know that if I draw a line now, it is going directly from this surface and not sticking right out the end here. Okay, so that's one feature of the snapping. Also, you've got endpoints, which will come up green. You've got midpoints, it'll come up light blue. And anywhere on the line will come up red, which basically means it's on the edge of a shape. So use these quite a bit. It means that you haven't got to worry about zooming right in to make sure that something that you've drawn properly attaches to somewhere else. If you know that it's snapped to it, you can be confident that it's drawn where you want it to. So it almost acts like a little bit of a magnet. The closer you get to an area, it'll suddenly just want to snap to it. All right, and if you want to get really close without it snapping, all you need to do is zoom right in, and then you'll be able to go closer to that before it does that magnetic click. All right, so the last thing we're going to cover in this first tutorial is how to apply some material, so how to colorize the different shapes that you have made in this world. So we click on the paint bucket, and that comes up with a default here of lots of different categories, which you can also access through the drop-down menu. So if I want to go with a basic color, I can select that option. And when this loads up, I've got lots of different colors here. So I'm going to go yellow, and I can click on different faces to make it yellow. I can also go in and select a different, more realistic texture. So I might want to get metal, select one of these, and I can go around and apply that metallic texture. Now, we can also edit a material. So for the purpose of this one, I'm going to go into roofing. We'll put some shingles up there, and I'm going to put some roofing on the top of all of these. So it's done all of those different textures, but if I go into edit, I can also change the color a little bit, and I can also change the opacity down here, which allows me to partially see through my material. Now this is useful to show that everything that you create is actually hollow. So even though it might look solid, the insides of it don't exist. So you don't really see that until you've either made your materials, you've reduced the opacity significantly, or if they're solid, you can use your arrow tool. You can just select one of the faces and press delete on your keyboard, and that will remove it entirely, and you can see that it's hollow, including that section there on the side that I've pulled out from this shape. So your job now is to make sure that you are comfortable with all of those first few tools that I've shown you, which are predominantly over here. You've got your pen tool, your rectangle, your circle. You can play around with the arc tool if you want, and that allows you to do an endpoint of an arc, and then you can tell it how far you want it to go. There's probably one other thing which is really useful to know at this stage, and that's to point out the fact, or two things actually, that this lady here, she will never, you won't see the side or the back of her. She'll always be facing the camera. Now she's there for a special reason, and that is to show you scale. So later on you'll have a job of modeling a house. If the house looks ridiculously small or way too big for the size of this lady, you know you've done something wrong with your scaling. So she's useful to leave there. If you want, you can delete her by using the arrow tool, clicking on her and pressing delete, and she'll go away. But typically she is really good to leave where she is. All right, she serves a purpose. Now the other thing is these lines. You've got a blue one, a green one, and a red one. Now these are axes. So if we're drawing shapes and lines, so if I use my pen tool and I click here and I drag straight up in the air, I know that that is going directly up because it's blue. So it's going perpendicular to the line over here, all right, my axis. and blue shows me that it is exactly going straight up in the air. Now, if I change over to here, you'll see it turns red, and the same, it goes green if I point in this direction. So this can be a useful feature for later on. Okay, so enjoy playing with these tools, and once you're feeling comfortable with them, you can go on to the next video.